It's Friday morning. The STLHD Nation podcast is back. Okay, now we can jump into it.
Now we can jump in. I'm wearing shorts because it's warm outside.
I'm wearing short socks because it's warm outside.
And a vest.
And a vest. It's chilly in the morning.
You need more insulation like myself. So I'm like a walrus.
It's nice finally in the Pacific Northwest, and my house still in the morning doesn't have frost, but it's got the dew, you know, and it's a little chilly in the morning.
Yeah.
Walk the kids to school.
It's nice. It's brisk.
I'm happy about
It's
it.
the best time to fish.
Yeah, we got to hit the Willamette.
It's time for bass fishing.
Yep. I'm excited about that. Well, I wanted to ask you a question. I've been thinking about what we're going to talk about today, and I think I got a good one. I want to surprise you with.
All right, let's hear it.
I'm
I'm sure I got an opinion on it because I got
All right.
an opinion on everything else.
What was the first fish you remember catching? This leads into another topic, but
The first fish that I actually remember
yeah,
was when I was a kid. As you know, I didn't grow up with my dad, but
Yep.
at this point, I still lived in California, and I still saw him like once a year because he was a real
he
winner.
was in the circus.
He was a winner.
Yeah.
He was a real stand-up dude.
He ran the Tilt-A-Whirl, didn't he?
The bottle throw. He glued the bottles together so you couldn't knock him down.
That's right.
No, I don't even know what he did.
Bastard.
So I drink
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
But anyway, he came and got me for a camping trip.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to, I believe, the Eel River on his motorcycle because, you know, I was like 7 years old.
Yeah, that seems legit.
Throwing me on the back of a motorcycle and
No
go
helmet.
camping. I'm sure not. Probably let me drive. I don't know. But anyway, and we went there, and I caught what I thought was a big trout, and
Yeah.
he was like, "Oh my God, it's a steelhead!" And then we promptly ate it. And I know nothing about whether we should have or any of that stuff. But I
Yeah.
remember catching it. It was
What year was this, you think?
I was like 7, so that would have been almost 39 years ago. Was
85?
84? Yeah,
Yeah.
39 years ago.
Yeah.
So probably 84, roughly.
That's the first memory of you
That's
catching
the
a fish.
first like fish I remember catching.
Yeah. You could have
Like-
had a bluegill here and there before then.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I don't remember, anything that stuck out in my head before that first fish.
Yeah.
And again, I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
So I remember it. I thought it was a big giant trout. I remember I caught it on a minnow that I caught in. So this is going to be a terrible story.
It was 1984.
1984.
Yeah.
Dad was a giant piece of crap. Took me on his motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
Had a pistol with him. Let me shoot it
Nice.
at some fish in the river. And this is a worse story. God, let me shoot at some fish in the river.
Yeah.
One of the minnows,
Yeah.
probably baby salmon.
You were how old?
7. I was
Yeah,
7.
Yeah.
I remember it was like a 38 special or some little short snub nose pistol.
And
The
this
old,
is why we are the way that we are.
This is why we are who we are. Let me shoot some fish with it, and then put one on my hook and caught.
He sounds like a real piece of shit dad, but a fun guy to hang out with.
Yeah, I think
Otherwise,
definitely the first part for sure.
yeah.
Real piece of shit dad. But anyway, that's the fish I remember
I
catching.
think that's probably the case for a lot of pieces of shit dads. That's probably not the right English, but
Yeah.
but they're they're terrible father, fun guy to hang out with.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think my first fish, if I can, that I have a memory of, was at Little Grass Valley Lake, Northern California, under a bobber with some salmon eggs, fishing out of a little tiny 12-foot Valco with my
Little
dad.
Jumbo.
Yeah, and my brother. That's the first memory of. I'm sure that I caught other fish before then.
Yeah.
You know, I'm positive my dad had a stick with a string and a piece of corn. You know.
Yeah.
But that's the first one I remember. And we probably caught a pile of them that day and went back to the campsite and cooked them up and
Just little pellet heads.
yeah. I mean, like the fish we caught down there with Chuck. Like that.
Oh,
Yeah. That's what Little Grass Valley is like. That kind of reservoir kind of thing.
it's great.
Yeah, and it was and then we used to do that all the time. And the reason I bring that up is, they keep telling you, and I imagine it's true, but they keep saying that fishing license sales are declining year after year after year, and people just aren't getting into fishing or hunting for that matter. There's a lot more people that are into the outdoors, quote unquote, hiking, mountain biking, whatever, right?
Yeah,
but
lugging their camera around.
Yeah,
taking
but
selfies.
Very few people are getting into fishing specifically, which I'm talking about. And I think that obviously that starts at a really young age. And so I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they've both caught buckets of bluegill, a couple bass, and some kokanee. And that's because I make an effort, and I'm sure you made an effort with your boys when they were young to take them out.
Yeah,
And
both my boys love to fish.
Yep.
Both of them, Liam, my youngest, more than Ezra, my oldest. He likes to fish some. Liam is obsessed with it, sort of like I was, and so Liam is just, he would go fishing every day if he could.
Yeah.
I think there's some amount of it that is, some kids are born like way more into it, and then you can cultivate that and raise that up in them. And some kids, like my oldest son, he likes to go fishing. He'll go fishing with his friends, go to the lake, but he's not as like hardcore,
And it might be something he gets more into the older he gets, right?
100%. It ebbed and flowed for me in my life. There was times when I would go fishing every day, and then I got into high school and kind of didn't fish hardly at all because I had other stuff to do and kind of left that alone. And then after college, I kind of got back into it and really ended up being a guide. And so kind of there was times in my life I didn't fish at all, and times in my life I fished all the time obsessively.
Yeah, I mean, before we started this business, I fished all the time. I fished 4 or 5 days a week. And then, start a business, have kids, all that stuff, and it steadily goes down. But we do live more indoor lifestyle than previous generations. It's obviously not a necessity. We don't have to sustain ourselves fishing anymore, and we can talk about that's a different conversation, but we don't have to, right? And I think in rural communities, obviously hunting and fishing is more common than it is in urban communities. But obviously in my lifetime, there's seen this massive population shift from people moving from the outskirts of town into town. Urban centers have just grown massively in their populations. Portland is a prime example of that. And then the pandemic hits, and everybody gets fired up to go outside because it was like the one thing you could do, right? Early on. So everybody goes out and they buy fishing licenses and they buy fishing rods and kayaks and all this shit. And they go out and they get into the outdoors. And then you start to see people moving outside of town again because they're sick of being in urban centers. They want space, or they're sick of the politics in those urban centers and they want something different. So you have places like Texas and Tennessee and Virginia. There's this mass exodus from urban centers moving into these rural places.
Well, and even the ability now to not have to live in that urban center to have
because
those
of the
jobs.
internet.
That's a huge part of
Correct.
it. Like a lot of people moved to an urban center because they needed to make more money. They needed to have those things. Now they work remotely. They can go live wherever they want and get the same pay. That's a huge part of it too.
Absolutely. But do you think we're going to see it because of that? And do you think we're going to see an increase? Because you're a product of your environment. I think, I know that I grew up in an extremely rural part of Northern California that was nothing but agriculture and hunting and fishing. I mean, it was just, even if your parents didn't do it, it was part of your life. It was all around you, nonstop. Every restaurant had, taxidermy ducks and fish hanging on the wall.
Yep.
I mean, it's literally everything. Every sign when you get into Yuba City, it says "Welcome to Yuba City," and there's mallards. I mean, it was just part of who you were, or who we were as a people, right? And then I moved to Oregon, and it was still the same in Southern Oregon. And then I moved to from Brookings to Portland, and experienced different things and different people and different cultures. And I changed because I was exposed to different things, right? But do you think that these people who grew up in an urban center and then moved to a rural, this is a deep conversation, but like, do you think that these people who moved from an urban center, grew up in an urban center, moved to a rural community, will start to take on those hobbies and interests of people in the rural communities, and specifically fishing and hunting? And the reason I bring this up, because I think that they will, because we're seeing a massive growth in we're sold in farm and ranch stores, but that retail sector of farm and ranch and those types of stores is exploding. People with small, they have these massive gardens, but they're on a small piece of land. Backyard chickens, backyard goats, rabbits, and all kinds of stuff. People are just, even though they're not like sustaining their family on it, but it's a hobby. It's a fun thing to do because it's an activity that makes them feel like part of that culture, right?
I think that you hit the nail on the head there. We all want to be included and be,
we're tribal.
Yeah, we're tribal.
Everybody's
So
tribal.
The minute you live in a place where that's part of the culture, you're more inclined to be part of that culture.
Yeah.
Also though, and we talked about this in the just looking at it through the lens of my kids and living in different places or growing up in different places. I grew up in a town that, my entire high school had 400 kids in it.
Yeah.
Yep. That's, it's smaller than my kids' graduating class.
Mm-hmm.
My entire high school is smaller than my kids' graduating class. Yeah. I had, FFA.
Yep.
And we had metal shop, and
Yep.
we had wood shop, and we had,
Same.
Whatever. And there was band kids, and there was that, and there was sports. But, and then my kids go to school, and, they can join band, and they can join orchestra, and they can join choir, and they can join
painting club,
and there's art, and there's a giant ceramic studio, and there's
there's no metal shop.
There is metal shop.
Is
there's
there?
wood shop, and there's
I thought they did away with all that stuff.
We live in a pretty cool place because
you got a little mix.
We get a good mix of being close to town and being rural, and so we kind of get the best of both worlds, I feel like. But the point is that the opportunity when you live in a more, and this not just from school but from life, the opportunity to do things, there's just so much more to do. There's so much more,
mm-hmm.
and so it splits your time.
Mm-hmm.
It splits your your ability, and you tend to pick and choose, and so you make a bunch of friends who are in I don't even know, Dungeons and Dragons, and you live downtown, and that's what you do.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you do, So you make it, and then all of a sudden you do that, and then you have a bunch of friends who do karaoke, and you start doing that, and you have a bunch of friends who go mountain biking in the urban park, and you do that, and pretty soon you just don't have time for 100 hobbies.
Yeah.
You move to Yuba City still. What are you going to do there? You're going to fish? You're going to hunt?
Yeah.
You're going to drink? You're going to fight? I don't know what other opportunity, but you're just
fentanyl,
yeah. Opioid crisis,
meth and fentanyl.
Yeah. But my point is, when you have those things, and that's what you can do. That's what you do, because people want to do things. They want to go be part of things. They want to be, they make friends, and those friends invite them to do things. But when there's 10,000 people in the 2 blocks closest to you, and there's 500 different things to do, you got to pick and choose. You might not end up in that place where you decide to fish or you decide to
Yeah,
hunt.
I just wonder, do you think that we will see an increase because of that? I think we will. It might be slight.
I believe so, totally.
It might be slight, but I think we'll see an increase in people getting fishing licenses. But I think that we'll see an increase in hunting licenses. I think we're going to see an increase in people who become more comfortable with the idea of owning a firearm. People. I think we're going to see an increase in all of the things that you would associate with rural communities. Is that your phone?
Yeah, in the other room, but it's noisy.
You couldn't turn it on silent? This isn't important enough?
No. I didn't realize I'd be able to hear it a room away.
You know what I mean? I think that's real. I think it's... and I think it's cool because on the flip side of that, I think you're going to see, and we're seeing it, you're going to see rural communities absorbing some things that you wouldn't normally associate. I mean, just
good and bad. I mean,
dude, good and bad, agreed. But I think music is a great barometer for cultural shifts, and whether you like it or not, I think it does sort of tell you where things are going. And you look at, I watched the Academy of Country Music Awards last night, and normally I never do that, but it was Dolly Parton and Garth Brooks hosting it, and I was like, this is either going to be great or a train wreck. It was a train wreck. Yeah, it was an absolute train wreck. But it's Dolly Parton.
Not because of Dolly Parton, because she is a goddamn national treasure.
She is a national treasure, and not because of the two of them. Although she's old. She still looks like $1 million, but god dang it, she's old.
That seems to be happening to a lot of people these days.
Yeah,
they're old.
Yeah, and just because you can live longer doesn't mean you should.
Or at least, maybe if you're living longer, you should age gracefully into retirement sooner and live out your days having fun with your great grandchildren.
Is held together with duct tape and baling wire, but she is still looking good. But it was crazy though, because you had Luke Combs singing with Ed Sheeran. You had all of these collaborations of different things. There was different cultures combining. Now, personally, I like my country music to be country music, and my hip hop to be hip hop, and my whatever to be whatever. Right? I prefer to, if I want to listen to country music, I want it to sound like country music.
It's like when you put your stuff on your plate, you don't want it to mix together.
I don't want my mashed potatoes
mixed with your peas.
It's my peas. No. So personally, I like my country music to sound like country music, and my rock and roll to sound like rock and roll, and all of that stuff. I mean, little crossover is cool, but I don't know. I just think that if you're having the Academy of Country Music Awards, it didn't really feel like it
should probably be country music.
Exactly.
Just throw that out there.
However, I do think it is a good, as I said, I do think music is a good barometer of where things are going, in that people are starting to be comfortable with experiencing different things depending on different cultures. And I think it's cool that we're seeing there's a lot of youth fishing groups for urban centered populations, trying to get those kids who in underserved communities and that type of thing out there fishing and into the outdoors. And I think that's awesome. And there's one, Get Hooked is one that I've been exposed to lately, and they do a great job. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how that shifts moving forward. And I know there's people, and leave comments if you want, but there's people who are like, I don't want more people on the river, and there's too much pressure and all of that stuff. And you're 100% valid. However, if you don't have the funds, and that's a whole other conversation about where those funds go, but if you don't have the funds to support the fisheries or just wildlife management in general, then the more people who do it, the more people care about it, right?
Yeah, I think the best I've ever heard it put is somebody once told me, if nobody cares about it, then nobody fights for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants to go to the river and see 500 people lined up in the one stretch of river you want to fish. But also, it's pretty hard to ruin the river if 500 people in every spot show up to fight for it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and so it does have that balance. I think too, the other thing we run into is the natural ebb and flow of popularity of everything.
True.
You know, and that might be part of, you know, people read too much into demographic changes and population shifts, and I think there's a natural ebb and flow of what is popular, you know.
No, I'm just posing a question. I know you know that, but I'm just posing a question because I thought it was interesting. As I was watching that show last night, it got me thinking about this. I was like, I wonder if more people are going to fish as they move into these more. And I watched a Joe Rogan podcast with Luke Combs, and they were talking about people moving to Austin, people moving to Tennessee, and Luke Combs was talking about how he didn't even get into hunting until he moved to Nashville, and some of his songwriter buddies were like, hey, you want to go hunting with us? And now he's like obsessed with it. And I think that's cool. You know, there's tons of people who their parents don't take them fishing when they're kids. I mean, did your parents take you fishing when you were a kid?
Not a ton, no.
Like, what?
Like
handful of times?
Handful of times I caught it.
Because you happened to be camping and they were like, yeah, let's
just
try this.
A little trout here and there, like once, twice.
Yeah, and I mean, there's, I think, a lot of people who would benefit from that. I mean, I know that when I take my girls fishing, I got about 30, 45 minutes with them before they lose interest because they're little kids, right? But as they get older, that will become more established as something that we do, you know? I think that's cool. I think, personally believe the world would be a much better place if everybody knew where their food came from and everybody fished and hunted. I really do. I think there's some part of that connects you with the natural world. And I think as we lose that understanding of the natural world, we lose understanding of each other. I mean, we're just animals, right? I mean, if everything becomes packaged and bought and sold in a grocery store or a Walmart,
shrink wrapped in plastic, stuck on a styrofoam
you
boat,
lose any connection with it. You know, I remember gutting the first trout or the first kokanee with Laurel and my niece, and they're sitting there poking the fish heart. You know, they're like, "What's that?" Ew, you know, but they're learning about the natural world, right, in the simplest way possible. And I think that's so freaking important for kids to understand that, because now we drive by every day when we go, not every day, but when we go into Canby to go to Wilco, we go out of our way to go through the farmland outside of Canby, and there's this little spot where there's a bunch of pigs, and the girls go, "Oh, look at those fuzzy pigs, they're so cute," and I go, "And delicious," you know, and they go, "Ha ha ha." They're not like shocked by that. They understand it's food, right? Losing that as a society, I think, is one of the biggest problems that we have. Because when you grow up with a firearm and you learn how to respect it and you understand that it's a tool and how to use it properly, you have a respect for it that people who grow up with it as a toy or something that is non-existent, they're either afraid of it or they don't respect it enough. And the same thing goes for fish and just keeping up with like the tools of your craft, right? So like if you go fishing, I make the girls put stuff away and clean, you know, make sure the tackle box is organized and all that. There's so much built around that. Maybe I'm babbling here, but I think that I do think it's super important, right? I mean, obviously you do. It's a huge part of who you are.
A huge part.
Yeah. But if you hadn't had that?
I think too, I think, you know, There's a lot going.
You probably would have been a murderer, like a mass murderer.
How do
you probably would ride a motorcycle.
How do you know I'm not?
With no helmet.
I would have thrown my kid on a motorcycle, let him drive to the river, shot some fish.
Yeah, that's who you would have been.
That's who I would have been.
You'd be running a tilt-a-whirl right now instead of working.
And he flew in together bottles, dulling up the darts so you couldn't pop balloons with them.
That's right. Fishing kept you from being a carny.
I'd be running the little goldfish thing.
Don't be a carny, kids. Go fishing.
Go fishing. Don't be a carny. Yeah.
Sorry, carnies. It's a legitimate job. How many carnies do you think listen to our podcast?
Oh, probably.
I mean, there's only like 6 people who listen to it anyway. What percentage of those 6 people?
I would say 50%. 3 of them are carnies. 3 of the 6 people are carnies. This is like playing at the carnival right now. We've just lost half our listeners because we've insulted half our listeners by talking about carnies.
Take a chance and win some crap. What were we saying?
Oh, I was just going to say there's a lot of different things going on in that.
It's a lot.
Monologue.
There's a lot.
That was a big monologue.
It was a big monologue. Sorry.
You know, I think one of the things that happens, and one of the reasons it ebbs and flows too, is that, you know, and you and I have experienced this, I think some, maybe more me because I was a guide, but, you know, you go out and you get used to what it is when you're at its peak or at your peak. You know, let's say you fish every weekend and you think, you know, you're into it. And then all of a sudden it's not as good as you remember, or it's not what you remember. And you're
not as good as you remember.
Maybe you're not as good as you, all those things. And you ebb off. And I think culturally that happens, right? People go, oh, I don't like this as much, or it's not what I remember, whatever. But you get a new generation of people who do it, and it's as great as they'll ever remember.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also the thing. So if you if you grew up in downtown Portland and you move to Yuba City next week, and somebody invites you to go duck hunting, you're never going to go, oh my God, dude, it could have been so much better. You're going to go, this is the best duck hunting day I've ever had. It's amazing. And that's what ignites that passion in you and gets you excited. And I think, you know, as a guide, one of the things I learned early on is you can't you know, shop from your own wallet.
Yeah.
You know, how many days did you catch 3 steelhead and go, man, this is a bummer because last week I caught, you know, 10 every day.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden your guy goes, dude, I've been fishing for steelhead for 5 years. I've never caught one. This is the most amazing day I've ever had. And it gives you perspective.
It's a good point.
I think that's part of the natural ebb and flow. I think we get to a place where we, maybe me or you or some people who listen here fish all the time, go, man, our fisheries are not what they used to be. And it kind of bums you out. And maybe you back off, and maybe you aren't as passionate about it as you used to be. And then you get transplants, a guy who moves to Oregon from, you know,
this is great.
Nebraska, and he gets to go catch a salmon at Buoy 10, and he goes, oh my God. And, you know, those of us who have been here forever are like, I remember 5 years ago when you could catch 20 of these things in no time.
My buddy Matt from PA, he comes out here 4 times a year, or if not more, and just he's like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Why would I not come out here? And you know, people who grew up here are like, it was better 10 years ago.
100%. And so I think that transplant movement of people coming in do reignite excitement in those fisheries, because to them that worst day ever for you is still the most amazing day they've ever had because they've never done it before.
It reminds me of, going back to music, it reminds me of an article I read one time, I think it was in Amp magazine, with the dude from Dashboard Confessional. They were interviewing him because all these old punks were like, this isn't punk rock, it's, you know, pop punk bullshit. And he's like, that kid in Iowa who goes to the mall and buys a Blink-182 CD at Hot Topic, I'm dating myself, buys a CD at Hot Topic in the mall. Who does that anymore, right? But this is an old interview. But it struck me because he's like, that's the most punk rock thing that kid's got access to.
And if all he's ever heard is gospel music, it is mind-breaking.
Exactly, right?
And he becoms passionate about it.
And then maybe he goes back and he starts to learn about, you know, the Circle Jerks and Bad Religion, you know,
Dead
Sex
Kennedys
Pistols.
And,
but like over here, you get the same guy who's, you know, maybe bass fish in Ohio his whole life. Styles.
Yeah.
Styles
I was
comes
thinking
over
of
here.
him. Perfect example.
Catches some Chinook with us out of Bowie 10 and freaks out because he's just, I've never even, he's holding this fish going, I've never even seen anything like this. You know?
And every single aspect of that trip was amazing to him.
It was
even the seal stealing his fish.
We were like, man.
We were like, God damn, seal got your fish. And he's like, what are you talking about? That was amazing.
Yeah, everything was amazing to him. He was like a little kid experiencing everything for the first time, you know?
Yeah. I mean, so to take that.
To be fair, that second day was
both
insane.
Both days were fantastic.
Yeah.
But I'm
knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I'm just saying, to take that full circle, I think that movement of people helps to reignite that excitement, not only in that they now have access to it, but to them the experience is powerful.
I think it's going to be interesting. You know, there's so many people, especially people from the Pacific Northwest. I see it all the time online. They're like, you know, get down on people who bass fish or carp fish or whatever. And then they're like hardcore salmon and steelhead guys. And it's like, yes, we all know they're amazing. They're way harder to catch. It's more difficult. There's more expensive gear involved and there's all the stuff, right? However, I'm not going to get down on that person who's going out there. And I do think it's going to be interesting to see how many more people get into fishing, not just because of like, hey, look, I can get sponsorship on Instagram, you know, like, and maybe it's better for our business if we do it, but like I'm actively trying to not do a lot of that stuff, you know, because it's like, I don't know, it just feels like a fad that's going to go away. You know,
I think to me, to you probably, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but I think there's, you know, fishing for me is a thing that's personal. Yeah, fishing for me is personal. Yeah, you know, it's a thing I grew up doing. I love it. It's not a public like, hey, look at this thing. Everybody like my picture.
Yeah, some people like doing that. Some people don't.
It's a generational thing.
Yeah, I had a guy who was like one of our very first customers, had our stuff for a long time, and then he was just like, yeah, you know, I'm over it. Like, you got too many people who are really just interested in posting pictures and not just enjoying the moment, and it's not for me anymore. And I was like, I could see that perspective. I don't agree with it, but I could see it. And he sold everything that he owned on Marketplace of ours, and just was like, in fact, he said, he's like, I just don't want to wear like branded stuff anymore. I don't want to be a part of that community. And I was like, okay, valid. You know, I mean, do whatever you want. I wish you didn't, not because I want to sell you more t-shirts, but because I love that people associate being a part of our community with a positive, as a positive thing in their life. Right?
Well, especially when you've been with us so long.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, quite honestly, it was upsetting. I was, you know, but that's gonna happen. You know, you're in business 11 years. That stuff's gonna happen.